There are two main things we need to do in our scene in Unity before beginning to bake our lighting. The first is to mark objects as static, which we've done for the environment, checking static in the inspector for the environment object, which also changes all of the children, the furniture and toys in the room. And we can see in the top right here in the inspector that static is checked. Dropping down under the static checkbox shows us that this is actually marked as static for light map, occluder, batching, navigation, occludee, off-mesh link, and reflection probe. But what we really care about at the moment is just light map static. The next thing to do is to make sure that we're generating a second set of UVs for our light mapping. I'll take a look at this object, this dollhouse, in Autodesk Maya and look at the UVs and see why we need to generate additional UVs for our light mapping. I've imported this FBX into Maya just to be able to look at the UVs and see what's going on. With this object selected, I'll choose UV and UV Editor. What we'll see here is that this object is broken into many parts and spread out onto that texture. We have our front wall and side walls and our back wall, and also the roof. What we're seeing, though, is very common in games in that these UVs are stacked for the roof. This red stripe up here actually has all the UV coordinates for all of the roof tile on it. And so if we were to bake our lighting into these UVs, we'd actually see the same lighting repeated on every row of shingles on this house, and it would look rather odd. Additionally, we're seeing a difference in resolution in some objects between small details and larger planes, as we've wanted to allot more texture work to more visible areas of the house. When we texture then for games, it's very common to stack our UVs, making sure that we're optimizing our texture space as much as possible, but this is unsuitable for our light baking. I'll go back to Unity and look at generating light map UVs, so that we have a second set of UVs just for our lighting. Back here in Unity then, I'll go in the Assets folder, into my Models and into Environment, and I'll select my dollhouse model. I'll pull down the preview here, and we can see in the inspector there's a checkbox for Generate Light Map UVs. What we want to do then is for each of these props check Generate Light Map UVs, and this will let Unity generate a second set of UV coordinates just for the lighting to be mapped onto this object, while not disturbing the original set of UV coordinates which are responsible for controlling how this object is textured. If we need, we can go into the advanced settings. Generate Light Map UVs performs an automatic splitting and flattening of the UV coordinates of this object, and in the advanced controls we have control over how and when objects split into their different parts. What we may see, depending on the nature of the object, is that some things work better with larger UV shells, whereas others need to be split into smaller pieces. This also lets us tune how we're going to pack those UVs together in the Light Map Atlas. I'm going to roll up Advanced, make sure Generate Light Map UVs is checked, scroll down to the bottom of the inspector and click Apply. And now this object is ready for light mapping. What will happen then is that we'll get the texture on this object correctly, and then any lighting from the scene projected properly onto the polygons of this static dollhouse. Make sure to go through all of your objects then and check Generate Light Map UVs. I'll check it for the arches and click on the bat. Unity will pull up a notice saying there are unapplied import settings. I'll click Apply and move on. It's important to do this for all of the static objects. Typically, we would do this on import, although it's just as easy to do it afterwards. It also depends on how and when you'd like your light baking to begin. If we have in our lighting editor automatic checked down here at the bottom right, and things are not marked for light mapping, they're not marked as static, and they don't have light map UVs, they'll be ignored. So we can leave our auto bake on for larger objects we may want to see. What I've done is to turn off auto, and that way Unity is not going to try to keep pace with changes I'm making. So I'll go through these environment assets, make sure for each one that Generate Light Map UVs is checked. Unity can also import in two sets of UVs if needed from a content creation package such as Autodesk 3ds Max or Maya. In Maya, these will be the 0 and 1 set of UVs. Sometimes in a workflow, we may want to hand unwrap for our light maps a second set of UVs, spreading out that lighting on an object exactly where we want it, perhaps for a stylized look, and so we can import those if needed. In that case, we wouldn't check Generate Light Map UVs. For now though, because I want these to automatically flatten out, I'll go through these objects and check Generate Light Map UVs for all of the environment elements. Once this is done, we can proceed with our light baking and really fine-tune the look of our scene.